So, very good morning to all of you. Today we will have a class on periodontal response to external forces. So, in this, at the end of the class, we would like you to know what is the classification of trauma from occlusion, differentiate traumatic occlusion from trauma from occlusion, explain the different stages of trauma from occlusion, and illustrate what is primary and secondary trauma from occlusion. Basically, differentiate them both. The contents of this class includes introduction, adaptive capacity of periodontium to the occlusal forces, definition and types of trauma from occlusion, stages of tissue response to increase occlusal forces, effects of insufficient occlusal force, influence of trauma from occlusion on the progression of marginal periodontitis, zone of co-destruction, clinical radiographic signs and assessment of trauma from occlusion, a little about pathologic tooth migration, and we'll finish it with conclusion. So to start with, the sole purpose of periodontium is to support the periodontium. The sole purpose of periodontium is to support the bone. So you can see here, these are the periodontal structures which are around, and this the presence of this is to support the tooth here. Tooth depends also on the periodontal tissue to make itself present in the jaw. In other terms, periodontal tissues also depends on the functional activity of the tooth to remain healthy. So as you all know, occlusion is the lifeline of the periodontium. Occlusal forces stimulate the receptors in the periodontal ligament to regulate the jaw movements. The periodontium attempts to accommodate to the forces exerted on the ground according to how it is, whether it is going to be a strong force or it is going to be a weak force. Sorry. If the amount of occlusal force, if the magnitude of the occlusal force is more, then it gradually results in widening of the periodontal ligament, increase in number and width of the periodontal ligament fibers, and increase in the density of the alveolar bone. If there is a change in the direction, like for example, you can see the two diagrams here which denotes the stress pattern around the roots changed by the shifting of the direction of the occlusal forces. So you can see that the axial stresses are being applied, which resembles that of your occlusal forces. So when axial stresses are being applied, the force or the internal stresses are being concentrated at the root apices of both the root. But when there is going to be a mesial tilting force, that is when there is going to be force only on one side, you can see that the internal stresses have been concentrated along the root apices, that is along the mesial surface only. So gradually this surface will have more amount of force applied, more amount of destruction taking place more than the other sides. So in case if there is going to be a change in the direction, there is going to be a reorientation of stresses and strains within the periodontium. Next, coming on to the duration. So coming on to this, I would like to speak about how orthodontist treats you. He doesn't call you and tightens your braces every now and then. He does have some amount of time and he applies a little bit of intermittent forces. It is not a constant pressure which he is applying. Why is that so? It is because the constant pressure on the bone is more injurious than the intermittent forces, and that is the reason they give more amount of intermittent forces. And coming on to the frequency, which is what I told you the previous regarding duration, the more frequent the application of an intermittent forces, the more injurious is the force to the periodontium. So whenever you're going to any orthodontic treatment, see to that, or when you're doing any orthodontic treatment, when you're going to apply an intermittent force, see to that your frequency of application of force has to be you have to give sufficient amount of time between your first force and the subsequent application. Case where there is more amount of trauma which is occurring because of the crossbite here. Here you have crossbite, but this tooth has accommodated to the crossbite. There is no amount of any problem around the teeth, but this particular teeth has not accommodated to the crossbite, resulting in periodontal injury, and subsequently you can see bone loss and gingival recession along this area, which tells that trauma from occlusion has occurred in case of this teeth. So it is not how the teeth occlude, but rather how it produces the periodontal injury is what determines whether the occlusion is traumatic or not. Now, coming on to the reasons for deflective occlusal forces predisposing to trauma, it could be because of the patterns of mastication. Like, for example, this person is a unilateral chewer, so there is more force which is acting on this side compared to this side. So, this could result in deflective occlusal forces. Next, coming on to the loss of the teeth. Since there is loss of the teeth, there could be supraeruption of this teeth, and because of this space, there would be a tilt of these two teeth. Since these two teeth are tilted, then there could be more pressure from the normal occlusal forces of the opposing teeth. So all this could relate in deflective occlusal forces. Next, coming on to the loss of periodontal support. So in this case, supposing if the teeth has no proper periodontal bone support, naturally the normal occlusal forces which the teeth is getting also would make it to drift or make it to migrate to one side. Next, dental caries or faulty restorations may result in problems such as migration of the teeth. Next, coming on to flawed orthodontics. So treatment of orthodontics has to be performed very carefully with proper intermittent forces and frequency and duration. Otherwise, it might result in gingival recession and bone loss. Deflective occlusal adjustments and occlusal habits such as clenching or any parafunctional habits could cause deflective occlusal forces. Inadequate form of tooth, the form and position of teeth would also result in deflective occlusal forces. So now coming on to the classification about acute and chronic trauma from occlusion. So if you have understood the term trauma from occlusion, then it is easier for us to proceed. So again, I tell you that when the occlusion is going to be going to cause injury to the surrounding tissues, that injury is termed as trauma from occlusion. Now, coming on to the differences between the acute and chronic trauma from occlusion. So as such, the terms acute and chronic refers to some period of time, which means that acute results because of some immediate reaction and chronic is because of some gradual changes over a period of month. So as such, you can see that acute chronic trauma from occlusion results because of an abrupt occlusal impact, like for example immediately biting on a hard object or having new restorations, newly fabricated prosthetic appliances. So this might result in tooth pain, sensitivity to percussion and increased tooth mobility. So immediately after your patient, sometimes when he is given a crown, sometimes he would come the very second day telling that I have pain in the adjacent teeth or the same teeth, he has pain. So when you check out and see, you can see that there could be a little widened periodontal ligament space, which tells that there has been an increased trauma from occlusion because there has been high points in the prosthetic appliance. So this injury is easier to heal and the symptoms will subside if the cause is treated immediately, that is if the high points are removed. In other words, chronic if the high points are removed. Next, coming on to chronic trauma from occlusion. So this occurs because of gradual changes which are occurring in the occlusion, like for example tooth wear, drifting movement, extrusion of the teeth or parafunctional habits like bruxism or clenching. So this takes periods of years to produce changes in the surrounding periodontal structures, and attempts to repair the injury and restore the periodontium, this might result in angular bone defects without periodontal pockets, and the tooth might become mobile in this case. But this is without periodontal pockets, and therefore we need not worry about the pathology cause of periodontal pockets. Next, coming on to the difference between the primary and secondary trauma from occlusion. So now primary trauma from occlusion occurs because when the trauma from occlusion is the result of alteration in the occlusal forces. So here you can see that the bone level around the teeth is fully present, but when there is going to be a change of occlusal forces, then it could result in trauma from occlusion of the adjacent structures. So what is this change which could occur? When could be there an increased occlusal force? So as I told earlier itself, it could be because of an insertion of an high filling, or it could be an insertion of a new prosthetic replacement that has created excessive force on the abutment as well as the antagonistic teeth, or orthodontic movement into functionally unacceptable positions could result in this, or drifting movement or extension of the teeth into spaces created by unreplaced missing teeth could result in primary trauma from occlusion. Now, secondary trauma from occlusion. So here, as not like the earlier picture, you can see that the amount of bone on both the sides has been reduced. So this teeth has been already been affected by some amount of uh, uh, periodontal disease, and over this, if there is going to be some amount of occlusal force, just imagine the brunt of force that this teeth would have. So coming on to secondary trauma from occlusion, occurs when the adaptive capacity of the tissue to withstand the occlusal force is impaired from the bone loss resulting from the marginal inflammation. So because of marginal inflammation, already there is some amount of bone loss which has occurred. So on this, if there is going to be occlusal trauma, then it would result in a term called as secondary trauma from occlusion. This reduces the periodontal attachment area and alters the leverage on the remaining tissues. The periodontium becomes more vulnerable to injury, and previously well tolerated occlusal forces also could become traumatic. So coming on to the differences between primary and secondary trauma from occlusion. So in other words, here you can see that the bone level in as well as the gingival level and bone levels in both in these teeth is very good, but if there is going to be an increased occlusal force resulting in trauma from occlusion, then it comes under primary trauma from occlusion. Whereas in case of secondary trauma from occlusion, if there is an injured affected periodontium with normal or increased force, then it is termed to be secondary trauma from occlusion. So here again you can see that the bone level has reduced, and here you can see that there is periodontal pocket formation with a decrease in bone levels. So this results in secondary trauma from occlusion. When there is normal periodontium with increased occlusal forces, then it comes under the term primary trauma from occlusion. Now coming on to the stages of tissue response to increase occlusal forces, there are three types of tissue response. So first stage is your injury, second is your repair, and third is your adaptive remodeling. So we'll go about this flow chart which tells what happens during to the tissues when there is going to be an increased occlusal force in this. So here you can see that whenever there is going to be excessive occlusal forces, tissue injury results. So body does not keep quiet, it tries to attempt to repair this injury and restore the periodontium back. So if it restores back, it's well and good, but if it is not able to restore, that is when the force is very chronic, then the periodontium tries to remodel to cushion on its impact. How does it do? It tries to it does in several ways. One such way is that the periodontal ligament is widened at the expense of the bone. So because of this, there could be some angular bone defects which are occurring, but this is without the presence of the periodontal pocket. So the pathologic factor is not there, but you do have some amount of angular bone defects. So because of these bone defects, your teeth becomes loose. So this is the ultimate of your three stages what is occurring in case of your increased occlusal forces to the tissues. So first to start with on your stage 1, that is your stage of injury. So under the forces of occlusion, a tooth rotates around a fulcrum or an axis of rotation. Like for example, in case of a single rooted teeth, the axis of rotation is present at the junction between the middle and the apical third, whereas in case of a multi-rooted teeth, it's at the furcation area. This creates areas of pressure and tension on opposite sides of the fulcrum. So this line you will be able to understand it better with the help of the next slide. You can see that in this case there is an orthodontic bracket which is present, and there's an orthodontic force which is applied in this direction. So the direction where the force is being applied is said to be the tension side. So why it is said to be the tension side, we'll be dealing it about. And the other side which receives the brunt of this force is said to be the pressure side. Now coming on to the action and reaction, when there is going to be increased amount of force or slight amount of force, what is going to happen in this tension side and in this pressure side? So when there is slight tension which is given, that is a slight force, a slight force which is given. So what happens in the tension side is that there is going to be elongation of this periodontal ligament fibers, and there could be apposition of or formation of the alveolar bone in this area. And if there is going to be slight pressure in this area, there is going to be a little resorption. So you can very clearly see that there is elongated, and this area has been little resorption has started to take place. But if there is going to be severe tension, what happens? If there is going to be severe force acting, what happens is that there is going to be tearing of the periodontal ligament, and also it results in resorption instead of apposition of the bone. In other words, in the area of pressure side, if there is going to be greater pressure, there is going to be increased resorption of the alveolar bone around, resulting in resorption of the tooth surface, and this is termed as undermining resorption. So now coming on to the stage 2, which is called as the repair stage. So here, when the bone is resorbed by excessive occlusal forces, the body attempts to reinforce the thin bony trabeculae with the help of new bone formation. So this new bone formation is called as a buttressing bone formation. So here you can see a case where there is a deep bite present. So the incisors which are there in the lower arch, it's not totally seen because of the deep bite. So it is bearing the total brunt of the force from the maxillary side. So because of which its bone underneath has become thinned out, and as an ability to repair, it has started to form new bone above the thin bony trabeculae, which you can see outside. Can you see these white lines? So this is called as the buttressing bone formation. When this occurs within the jaw, it is called a central buttressing bone formation, and if it occurs like this on the bone surface, this shelf-like thickening is called as lipping, or otherwise called as a peripheral buttressing bone formation. Next, coming on to this stage 3, that is adaptive remodeling of the periodontium. So if the repair process cannot keep in pace with the destruction caused by the occlusion, then the periodontium is remodeled in an effort to create a structural relationship in which the forces are no longer injurious to the tissues. So this results in a widened periodontal ligament, and it could result in a funnel shaped region at the crust, and this might also result in angular bone loss in the bone, but again this is without pocket formation. Now coming on to the evolution of a graphical representation which tells about the evolution of traumatic lesion by variations in relative amounts of areas of bone formation and bone resorption in the periodontal bone surfaces. So here your x-axis determines the days after the traumatic interference, and the y-axis determines the percentage of bone surface undergoing bone resorption and bone formation. And here your straight line represents your bone formation, and your curved line represents your bone resorption. So you can see very well that during the normal period, that is when the teeth has no much occlusal forces or proper occlusal forces, the bone resorption and the formation pattern is going hand in hand. But whenever there is going to be an injury which is occurred, that is when there could be an increased occlusal force, what happens is that there is going to be increased amount of resorption, and there is going to be decreased amount of bone formation. And in case of repair, that is your second stage, the bone formation takes place, that is, as I told you, buttressing bone formation, that takes place more, and your resorption decreases. So in the third stage, the body starts to adapt to the increased occlusal forces, and both of them go hand in hand. Bone resorption as well as formation try to go hand in hand. However, resorption leads the way. Now, till now we had seen if there is going to be excessive occlusal forces, what is the problem, what are the problems which are occurring. But there are problems occurring even if there is going to be insufficient occlusal forces. So insufficient in the sense hyperfunction, Hyperfunction can result from an open bite relationship, like in case of this, an absence of functional antagonists or unilateral chewing habits that neglect one side of the mouth. Insufficient stimulation can cause thinning of the periodontal ligament, atrophy of the fibers, osteoporosis of the alveolar bone, and reduction in the bone. So, coming on to the effects of excessive occlusal forces on dental pulp. So, this has been a question of controversy whether excessive occlusal forces has a problem, does it cause any problem to the dental pulp. So, authors have told that there could be a possibility of damage in case if the force is excessive and chronic, especially in cases of multi-rooted teeth with furcation involvement. Another concept regarding the reversibility of traumatic lesions. So you could ask me whether if we take away the source of injury, like if we reduce the occlusion or reduce the source of injury, whether the trauma from occlusion is reversible. Yes, it is reversible, but the injurious force must be relieved for repair to occur on it. But if this is going to be present along with inflammation as a result of plaque, this may impair the reversibility of the traumatic lesion. So, we will be seeing in the next few slides what is going to happen when plaque is present along with the occlusal force, increased occlusal. So, as I told you, influence of trauma from occlusion on the progression of the marginal periodontitis. So, be very clear and clear with the concept that trauma from occlusion in no way occurs, does not affect the in no way affects the gingiva, but it occurs only in the supporting tissues. Trauma from occlusion does not cause pockets or gingivitis, but changes the architecture of the periodontal structures around the inflamed site. So this was a case which you can see where there is an orthodontic treatment which is being carried on. So you can see this lady where she has so much amount of bone loss, but they have carried on orthodontic treatment. You can also see the amount of pocket depth is present. But how is this possible? So in this case, the amount of force is not related to the injury around. It is because of the it is because that the patient is maintaining a very clean hygiene, that the orthodontists have gone in for the treatment. In other words, gingivitis plus traumatic occlusion has no synergistic effect, whereas periodontitis plus trauma from occlusion, if it is present, it aggravates the disease progression and complicates the clinical situation by resulting in increased bone destruction and infrabony pocket. So, to put forward to you that if a patient is able to maintain a proper good hygiene, proper oral hygiene, and able to control the plaque in that patient, even if there is going to be little amount of bone loss, you can carry on with occlusal forces, or you can carry on with orthodontic treatment. But if the patient is not going to maintain his oral hygiene properly, resulting in gingivitis followed by periodontitis, and in that case, if you're going to give occlusal forces or traumatic forces, in that case it might result in more amount of bone loss. Only if there is going to be presence of some amount of plaque, there is going to be an irritation to this area, resulting in marginal gingivitis. So the plaque associated lesion at a non-traumatized tooth propagates in an apical direction. First it involves these alveolar bone, first involving the alveolar bone, and later the periodontal ligament area. The progression of the lesion will result in a horizontal bone loss pattern. But in there is going to be a zone influence by the occlusion. So supposing in other words, if there is going to be increased amount of occlusal forces, it acts mostly on the periodontal ligament, the cementum, and the alveolar bone. Coronally, it is demarcated by the transeptal fibers and the dentoalveolar collagen fibers, and trauma from occlusion may cause a lesion where the vessels of the periodontal ligament are obliterated by the excessive occlusal forces. So as per Glickman, when the plaque induced inflammation enters the zone influenced by the occlusion, Glickman has told the term zone of co-destruction. So when this zone of when plaque induced area, when this area turns into a pocket and enters into this area, then it is termed as zone of co-destruction, that is into the area of your periodontal ligament or alveolar bone area. So these 2 points are little important. So the accumulation of bacterial plaque that initiates the gingivitis and results in periodontal pocket formation affects the marginal gingiva, but trauma from occlusion occurs in the supporting tooth and does not affect the gingiva. So be very specific that trauma from occlusion does not cause gingivitis, or it does not arise because of gingivitis. So these both are separate entities. But when a plaque influenced area goes into the area where it has been destroyed by trauma from occlusion, then it results in zone of co-destruction. So another notable point is that it is important to eliminate the marginal inflammatory component in cases of trauma from occlusion, because the presence of inflammation affects the bone regeneration after the removal of traumatizing contacts. Now coming on to the clinical and the radiographic signs of trauma from occlusion. So very first clinical sign which you can notice is the tooth mobility, and as I told you, there would be no pockets in standalone cases, but if it is present along with periodontitis, you could see some infrabony pocket. Radiographically, you can see many changes, like for example, increased width of periodontal space, thickening of the lamina dura, vertical or angular bone loss presence, radiolucency and condensation of the adular bone, and root resorption. Now, how will you assess the trauma from occlusion? So, generally, you might see for the presence of number of teeth, whether all the teeth are present or if there is going to be loss of any teeth which is present. And next is your plunger cusp relationship. So, we will be speaking about this plunger cusp in detail, where you will be this is a cusp which allows the food to wish through the opposite teeth. Next, coming on to the other assessment factors, tooth mobility, as I told you already, tooth wear facets, like for example, you could see untreated spots on the occlusal surface of the teeth, fractured tooth or restorations, tooth migration. The Fremet test would be possible, assessments of muscles of mastication and TMJ, the retrocuspal position or the intercuspal position, protrusive and lateral exertions, working and non-working contacts. All this has to be assessed for telling that the particular teeth is has trauma from occlusion. In other words, this refers to tooth displacement that results when the balance among the factors that maintain the physiologic tooth position is disturbed by the periodontal disease. So this occurs most frequently in the anterior region, but the posterior teeth could also be affected, usually accompanied by mobility and rotation. And pathologic tooth migration, if it occurs in the occlusal or in the incisal direction, it's called as extrusion. So in terms of normal terms, if there is going to be a tooth displacement that results because of a periodontal disease, tooth displacement could be either in the mesial, distal, or in the occlusal direction. If it is going to be because of a periodontal disease, then you tell it to be pathologically migrated. So two major factors play a role in maintaining the normal position of the teeth. One is the health and the normal height of the periodontal attachment apparatus. Second are the forces exerted on the teeth, like for example lips, cheek, and tongue. So if there is going to be an increased force from the tongue, like for example a macroglossic tongue, that could result in pushing of the teeth of outside, so like in the case where lisping could be one of the problems of macroglossia. Factors that are important in relation to the forces of occlusion include tooth morphologic features and cuspal inclination, presence of full complement of teeth, physiologic tendency towards mesial migration, nature and location of contact point relationships, proximal, incisal and occlusal attrition, axial inclination of the teeth. Now, coming out of the pathogenesis behind pathologic tooth migration, why does it migrate? What happens that it migrates? One could be, there are two important factors. The first one could be that it could be because of the result of a weakened periodontal support. Periodontitis, it creates an imbalance between the forces maintaining the tooth in position and the occlusal muscular forces the teeth that ordinarily needs to bear it. Because of periodontitis, there could be some amount of pathologic tooth migration. Second, if there is going to be any unreplaced teeth. So here is an unreplaced teeth, and because of which you can see all the changes which are taking place around the teeth. So all the changes which are taking place around the teeth. And occlusal contacts or pressure from the tongue. So here also you can see that the occlusal contact is not proper in this case. Food bolus during mastication and proliferating granulation tissue, and conditions similar to secondary trauma from occlusion could result in pathologic tooth migration. Now the difference between drifting and pathologic tooth migration. So drifting is a term which is more physiologic. So drifting does not result from the destruction of the periodontal tissues and it occurs only in the mesial direction, whereas pathologic tooth migration results from destruction of the periodontal tissue and this occurs in any direction. So to conclude, trauma from occlusion does not initiate gingivitis or it does not cause any pocket formation. It just constitutes an additional risk factor for the progression and the severity of the disease. An understanding of the effect of the trauma from occlusion on the periodontium is useful in the clinical management of periodontal problems.